every other product that exists, I can sue the company. I can hold them accountable if that product injures or kills you or your child on the basis that product could have made safer.
So Joe Rogan just had attorney Aaron Siri on to expose how vaccine companies operate under a legal framework that would be unthinkable for any other industry. Siri isn't some random activist. He successfully sued the CDC and forced them to admit under oath they have no safety studies. This gets explosive.
The only product, and I mean this literally, the only product in America where you cannot sue to say, had you made that product safer, my child wouldn't be dead. My child wouldn't be seriously injured. They wouldn't have a neurological disorder. They wouldn't have an immunological disorder. They wouldn't have a nervous system disorder. They wouldn't have a cardiac issue. Are childhood vaccines and child vaccines used by adults.
Think about this. If your car's brakes fail and kill someone, you can sue Ford. If a toy injures your child, you can sue Mattel. But if a vaccine causes permanent neurological damage, the company faces zero legal consequences. This immunity is so absolute, it's essentially a government-granted monopoly on harm.
It's the only one. And that's because of a law called the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986. It gave pharma companies that incredibly special immunity. Now, just to put that into context, okay, and I'll tie this back in a second as to how we ended up with this notion of this belief religion in vaccines, because, given industry 40 years of unopposed ability to influence, they're going to get pretty dang far, and they did with vaccines.
The 1986 Act is the smoking gun here. For 40 years, pharmaceutical companies have had zero financial incentive to improve vaccine safety because they literally cannot be held liable for injuries or deaths. No other industry in America enjoys this protection, not even defense contractors or nuclear power companies.
That's it. That's all there was. A child following the CDC schedule in 1986 got 3 injections on or before their first birthday. Okay? Those 3 products were causing so much harm and injury that every manufacturer of them went out of business. And that was the MMR vaccine, the DTP, and the OPV vaccine. Every single one, from 6 down to 1, or for the pertussis vaccine, 6 down to 1 for measles, about 3 down to 1 for polio.
This is stunning. In 1986, children got just 3 vaccines total, but those 3 were causing so many injuries that lawsuits were bankrupting every manufacturer. Instead of making safer products like every other industry does, Congress gave them blanket immunity. That's when the explosion began.
Congress did something completely unique. It said, you know what? We're just going to give you immunity. We're going to make it so that no company, no individual, no parent, no child can sue you for the injuries and deaths caused by your vaccine products. That is what the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act 1986 did. And not only for those 3 products, but for any other childhood vaccine thereafter. And what that effectively has done is given 40 years for the industry to promote their products with no pushback. When
Congress essentially said, we'll protect you from all future liability forever, not just for existing vaccines, but any new ones they develop. This created a perverse incentive where safety improvements actually hurt profits by adding unnecessary costs with no legal protection to gain.
Okay. It's not the government. Governments don't make products safer. Look at extremely authoritarian regimes where there was very little free market, like the former USSR. You think products were safe? No. What makes products safe? It's the economic self-interest of the company. It's the economic interest of the company to make the product safer. Why? You probably own stock, right? And where do you want your stock to go, up or down? How do you want it to go? You want it to go up or you want it to go down? Where do you want it to go?
Up.
You want it to go up. Okay. So do all the investors.
Right.
So does everybody who owns that stock. So does Wall Street. So does the CEO. So does the board. So does everybody. The people who have the stock. Everybody involved. All the employees that have stock options, including usually the major ones. Everybody wants it to go up.
This is basic economics. Without lawsuit risk, companies have no financial reason to invest in safety. Toyota recalls millions of cars over floor mat issues because lawsuits would cost billions. Vaccine makers face no such pressure. So why spend money perfecting safety when you're legally untouchable?
Because if your product causes injury and harm, then you're going to lose money. So you want to know typically. You have an economic self-interest as a corporation to know, not because you're altruistic, not because you're moral, not because you're ethical, just because you have that economic self-interest to assure the product is safe before you go to market and after you go to market, okay? And that exists for every product in America with effectively one exception, vaccines.
Every other pharmaceutical company lives in terror of product liability lawsuits. That's why they spend years and billions on safety testing. Remove that financial threat, and suddenly there's no business case for extensive safety research. It's not about morality, it's about profit and loss.
Most drugs are licensed based on multi-year placebo-controlled trials. Most of them. Why? Because the FDA requires it? Because the FDA is so great? No. Nothing to do with the FDA. It's because the company wants to know whether the drug is safe or not before it goes to market. Because you know what happens with the drug that they put out that's going to make $40 billion in revenue or $20 billion but causes $100 billion in harm? They end up upside down. So they want to know to a reasonable degree how safe the drug is before it goes to market.
Here's the key difference. Drug companies do rigorous multi-year placebo trials, not because the FDA is tough, but because one bad drug can bankrupt them in lawsuits. When you remove that legal threat, the economic incentive for thorough testing vanishes completely.
In contrast, for most childhood vaccines, instead of years, it's often days or weeks of safety review in the clinical trial. We're allowed upon to license them. Not a single, and I know that folks contest this all the time, but it's in the FDA literature. Not a single routine injected childhood vaccine was licensed based on a placebo-controlled trial, save for the COVID vaccine, by the way, for children. It's the only one. Not a single one, okay?
This is documented FDA fact, not opinion. Childhood vaccines get days or weeks of safety testing versus years for regular drugs. Only COVID vaccines for children had proper placebo trials. Every other routine childhood vaccine was approved without them. The contrast is staggering.
Right. So that gives you an example of the outcome of not having an economic self-interest.
Siri's book Vax Unvax compiles the actual FDA licensing documents that most people never see. He's not theorizing, he's reading directly from government sources. His legal background gives him access to primary documents that completely contradict public health messaging.
Your website says vaccines do not cause autism. Great. Please give us the studies that show that Hep B vaccine, given 3 times in the first 6 months of life, do not cause autism. Please give us the studies that show that DTaP vaccine, given 3 times in the first 6 months of life, do not cause autism.
This FOIA request was brilliant legal strategy. If vaccines don't cause autism as the CDC claims on their website, they should easily produce the studies proving it. It's like asking McDonald's to prove their fries don't contain poison. Should be simple, right?
They never gave us the studies. I sued them in federal court. I didn't go to Texas. I sued them in Southern District of New York. Okay, not the friendliest territory to bring that kind of lawsuit. Okay? Days before the hearing, I get a list of 20 studies finally, also from the DOJ, because they represent the CDC. Okay? Maybe they think I don't read.
The CDC's silence was deafening. They had years to provide studies and only coughed them up when facing a federal judge in Manhattan. Not exactly friendly territory for vaccine skeptics. Their desperation to avoid court testimony speaks volumes about what they were hiding.
I've read them. 19 of them have nothing to do with the vaccines given in the first 6 months of life. They were all either MMR studies or studies of an ingredient that wasn't in those vaccines.
Imagine asking Ford for studies proving their cars don't explode, and they send you research on Boeing planes and Honda motorcycles. That's essentially what the CDC did. Sent MMR studies when asked about hepatitis B and DTaP vaccines. Completely irrelevant deflection.
The vaccines in the first 6 months of life do not cause autism, because that's what the lawsuit was about, that FOIA request. He called me back and he said, yeah, they want to settle it. I said, all right, I gave him another chance. Those 20 studies were put into a settlement agreement between the CDC and ICANN, my client. The DOJ signed it on behalf of the CDC. I signed it on behalf of my client. And a federal judge in the Southern District of New York entered it as an order of the court in 2019, I believe it was. And there it was. I mean, I had done years and years of work fighting with them to try and figure out, Show me the vaccines don't cause autism. This was the crescendo. This was the end. I mean, when their back was to the wall, they had nothing. There are no studies.
This isn't Siri's opinion anymore. It's official federal court record. The CDC, under oath and facing perjury charges, admitted they have no safety studies for the vaccines given to babies in their first 6 months. No studies means no evidence of safety.
It's from Gallagher and Goodman out of the University of Stony Brook in the peer-reviewed literature, and it showed that kids that got Hep B vaccine versus those that did in the first month of life had 3 times the rate of autism, statistically significant. Gallagher Goodman, University of Stony Brook, it's on PubMed. That is the only study of Hep B vaccine and autism you will find in the peer-reviewed literature. If you're going to do it based on the science, on the published literature, that's the only one out there.
The irony is devastating. The only peer-reviewed study on hepatitis B and autism shows exactly what the CDC denies. 3 times higher autism rates in vaccinated babies, published by mainstream researchers at Stony Brook University. It's sitting right there on PubMed for anyone to read.
At the beginning of 2025, you know how many shots it was that a baby got on or before their first birthday? Take a guess.
72.
No, that's their whole childhood. 29.
29 by the first birthday?
Yes, on or before the first birthday. Went from 3 to 29 shots, including in utero. Now, with the recent changes, it's down to 19. And the reason I focus on the first year, most of those shots in the first 6 months of life, is that's when the baby is going through really critical stages of neurological, immunological development, right? Synapse. I mean, think how small a baby is, okay? And so they're really susceptible to various effects.
From 3 shots to 29 in the first year, that's a nearly 1,000% increase since the liability shield took effect. And this explosion happened during the most vulnerable period of brain and immune system development, when babies weigh just pounds, not hundreds of pounds like adults.
You now have over 40%, some data show over 50% of kids having chronic health issues, often multiple times the rate, okay? And what are those chronic health issues that have exploded? To be sure, by the way, any environmental insult can cause dysregulation in the body, okay? Including a pharmaceutical product, including vaccines. But when you look at those chronic diseases that have exploded, almost all of them have an etiology relating to some form of immune system dysregulation. Look at asthma, look at atopic issues, look at tics, look at ADHD. Nobody thinks about it this way, but if you look at the PubMed literature, there's immune markers that have gone awry in kids with ADHD. Okay.
The timeline is impossible to ignore. Chronic childhood diseases exploded from under 10% to over 40% as the vaccine schedule expanded. Autism, ADHD, allergies, autoimmune conditions, all tied to immune dysfunction, all skyrocketing since 1986. The correlation is stark.
I had a business idea for you.
Okay.
Want to hear it?
Sure.
It's a great business idea. Hey, listen, we're going to sell this product. John.
Okay.
We're going to.
Okay. Let's go.
Okay. We can inject it into people. Are you worried it's going to hurt people?
Well, I'm a little worried until I want to hear your story first.
But don't worry. Don't
Okay.
worry.
Okay,
Don't
I'm not
worry.
gonna worry.
Don't worry about it because governments can give us immunity to liability no matter how many people we hurt or kill. Okay.
Oh, how
Yes.
did you work that out?
Yeah, I know. Now the weird part is you might be saying to me, you say, Aaron, wait a second. But who the hell did take that? And I'll say, Joe, don't worry. The government's going to mandate it too.
Oh,
and you might say,
clever.
okay, but what if people rise up? And I'll say, Joe, don't worry. They're going to spend billions convincing the public it's the best thing since sliced bread. And then you're going to say, but what if people still don't want to pay for it? And I'll say, don't worry. The government, through a program, literally pays for half of all vaccine, guarantees payment to the pharma companies, even if people cannot pay. So,
sounds like a good investment.
no liability, guaranteed market, free promotion, guaranteed payment. It's the most. If it wasn't vaccines, you'd say it's insane. It is insane, and that is the business model of vaccines.
This business model would be rejected as insane for any other product. Complete immunity from harm, government-mandated customers, taxpayer-funded marketing, and guaranteed payments. It's the perfect storm of corporate welfare that started with the 1986 Act and now generates billions in risk-free profits.